This is the Good Government Podcast with Aaron Slutkin and Michael Hoffpower.
Good morning, Aaron.
Good morning, Mike.
Here we are to talk about the Federalist Papers, and today we're going to discuss a little bit of Federalist 1. I think we should start by admitting why one should study the Federalist Papers and what their goal is.
The Constitution that the Federalist helps convince Americans to adopt still governs us today. Maybe it would be better to say that we still govern ourselves by it today. And having an idea of how the government is supposed to work will help us better govern ourselves. Today, you and I know the Constitution comes under attack in the most prominent newspapers in the country. And occasionally we see presidential candidates, senatorial candidates, claiming that it's insufficient to deal with our problems. And so I think trying to get a good idea of why the Constitution was written the way it was written and understand the motives behind the document will provide a civic education for ourselves and for our listeners.
I agree. So we should read the Federalist Papers so we can understand the law of the land in the clearest way possible as it was originally built. The Constitution is, of course, changed, but nonetheless, features of it, namely separation of powers, representation in an extended sphere, persist. The author of the Federalist Papers goes by the pen name Publius. Not to get too into it, but he's turning back to Rome, to a fellow named Publius, who, along with the fellow named Brutus, expelled the Tarquins, got rid of the kings, and helped establish Republican Rome. So Publius adopts from the beginning the name of a liberator who gives Republican government where there's representation, where the people participate in lawmaking in some way or another. Publius adopts that name. And at the same time, the three human beings who are Publius, Madison, Jay, and Hamilton, also try to indicate to their audience that they are not doing this out of personal desire for fame. By using a pen name, you shouldn't know who this is. Now, of course, it comes out, and Alexander Hamilton is a very ambitious person, as is Madison. These people aspire for fame in some way or another. Fame is the occupation of the noblest minds, Publius will tell us. So that's them too. But it at least means from the beginning to offer us some sense that these people are doing this, or this person is doing this for us. So we can't describe malicious motive to them. Why read the Fed Papers? To try and understand the Constitution. And then you can decide in an informed manner whether you like it or not, or the significance, good or bad, of the changes that we've seen in the course of American political history. And the name is neat to pay attention to and what it means to show us. But I'm more interested in the arguments on the page. If that's sufficient, Mr. Slutkin, I suggest we turn to Federalist Paper number 1.
Let's get into it.
The beginning is at least half the whole of any enterprise. And here we have a very famous first paragraph. What leaps out at us is whether or not societies of men are really capable or not of establishing good government from reflection and choice, or whether they're forever destined to depend for their political constitutions on accident and force. This paper announces that the people of the United States are now called upon to deliberate upon this Constitution and decide whether they want to ratify it, adopt it as the law of the land. And in doing so, they are going to settle a question, whether or not human beings are capable of governing themselves based on reflection and choice, or whether they are forever destined to depend upon their political constitutions in terms of accident and force. What's at stake here, then, is something that will matter for the happiness of humankind or the general misfortune of humankind, Publius says. The stakes are high, the responsibility is real. What do you think of this paragraph, Aaron?
Well, it's amazing So I think the beginning is so gripping, right? There's no background Publius gives you. It's just after an unequivocal experience of the efficacy of the subsisting federal government. As soon as you enter the text, you are already wrapped in the chaos of the government of the Articles of Confederation.
Yeah, why is it chaotic? Can you give me just like 30 seconds of what I should know about why the Articles are not that good?
Sure. The Articles of Confederation govern the United States beginning in 1781. That's when they're ratified. They're proposed in 1776, shortly after the Declaration of Independence. They are in some ways the de facto government. And the primary fault, at least Madison suggests, 1/3 of Publius suggests, of the Articles of Confederation is they lack a sanction to the laws created by the Confederation Congress. So the taxes that will fund the federal government, that will fund the Continental Army, as Washington will complain, that will fund any kind of interstate commerce, are not taxes in the sense that we understand them, demands of money that will be paid or else there will be a penalty. Instead, they're simply, I think the term is requisitions. They're requests. It's me sending you a Venmo request and I have no gun to your head. I cannot make you pay it. Washington writes to Madison, perhaps we had a too high an estimate of human nature in framing this government, the assumption that the common cause, the sense of Americanness, the sense of the public good would have created cooperation with the Confederation Congress fades away pretty soon. And then there's a problem, and this plays into the decision to call a constitutional convention rather than amend the Articles of Confederation within the Confederation Congress. Any amendment required unanimous consent from each state, and each state had equal representation in the Confederation Congress. The Confederation Congress could get nothing of importance done. It could not pay for anything, and it could not be amended inside the structure of the document. The result of this is an Annapolis Convention is called, and the Annapolis Convention recommends a constitutional convention. And while preparing for the convention, a handful of delegates who have arrived early, particularly the delegations from Virginia and Pennsylvania, composed primarily of Washington, Madison, George Mason, Benjamin Franklin, begin putting together a plan not to revise the Articles of Confederation, but in fact begin adopting the document that becomes the Constitution. I realized that was more than 30 seconds. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. No, it was great. Thank you. So the thing lacks teeth. As you pointed to when you said, as George Washington will complain, everyone should know about the Newburgh Conspiracy.
Yes.
What a very important moment in American history. It can't pay for the armies. It can't pay for trying to secure our liberty. And even if it had these teeth and this ability to do this, it lacks certain key components of good government in terms of Montesquieuian theory, and as Publius will also argue, namely a separation of powers. And finally, it doesn't have anything to protect against faction. This is another thing which Madison is going to worry about in the Vice's statement. So I would argue, looking backwards from Publius, the problem is that the Articles of Confederation are not good government. It's not good government because it doesn't have stability, it doesn't have energy, it doesn't give enough attention to what it takes to secure liberty, and finally, it doesn't have a true Republican form. Those four things we shall see in our study of the Federalist Papers comprise good government. Publius is here to give it to us if we can but listen. We are now invited to deliberate upon this new Constitution out of what? How did you want to say it, Aaron? Out of this chaos, out of this terrible situation. So now it's as if you want us to see this is a second Constitution, a new law of the land, and it is important. We must understand that the consequences are grave. Existence of the Union hangs in the balance. The safety and welfare of the parts of which the Union is composed hang in the balance. The fate of an empire hangs in the balance. You have now a responsibility to deliberate and choose. Is that possible? Can government be formed surely on the basis of deliberation and choice? It is my argument that Publius shows all politics contains accident. It is going to contain something of force. What we can do, though, is lift it through our reflection and choice regarding those matters of accident. all of the ambitions of men, all of the material that is human beings, the stuff of us. And so what we can do is deliberate and choose inside of those things, but we can't simply make human beings out of clay. You have to work with the material before you. So now prudence, statesmanship is to the fore. Well, how much can we actually be prudent? How much can we actually be moderate? How much can we be just?
I think it's interesting. Publius is going to allude to the praiseworthiness of the government that the people are considering. He's going to talk about a government with sufficient energy later in the paper. He's going to speak when he refers to the plan of the Federalist, of the security which its adoption will afford to the preservation of that species of government, to liberty and to property. But before he does that, largely what follows is a commentary on the public debate, which is interesting considering the way this paper has begun after an unequivocal experience of the inefficacy of the subsisting federal government, which is to say, after an accident, after a matter of bad choice, the Articles of Confederation, where we are with Publius in New York, sitting side by side maybe, drafting Federalist 1, in the statesman founder working with the material he has. Part of the reason that is because of accident, not simply rational choice. And then we can look at other reasons, and I think that's what the remainder of the paper does until we get to that outline of the entire work. And then Publius is going to suggest, if not an antidote, if not a way in which we can make politics founded on reflection and choice, a way that we can take the problem of accident and force and temper it, which is the virtue of moderation.
Just as a tiny aside, accidents are opportunities for these sorts of human beings.
Right. How did you and I meet?
Yeah.
Happy accident. Right.
And it's an opportunity. And here it's an opportunity to demonstrate to the world whether or not human beings can deliberate and choose to live under good government. You know, look, the articles were made while the author was on the run from England's forces throughout America. So, you know, pretty good stuff, but nonetheless, insufficient. So we could turn the screws on paragraph 1 for quite some time. I think it's very fruitful to do so, but because we already did so in episode 2, and in the name of expediency, let's treat now paragraphs 2, 3, and 4 as a whole in light of the challenge or problems that have been laid out for us in paragraph 1. The stakes are high. Are you going to be able to deliberate and choose?
Happy will it be, Publius says, if our choice should be directed by a judicious estimate of our true interests, unperplexed and unbiased by considerations not connected with the public good. Does he expect that?
I was hoping you were going to read the next sentence as well.
But this is a thing more ardently to be wished for than seriously to be expected. Why?
Because of you, because of me, because of our nature as human beings. All politics must have, as much as possible, a thoroughgoing understanding of the material with which it works. For whom are you lawmaking and adjudicating? Human being. What are the qualities of the human being? I love my own. I am prideful. Maybe I'm vain. Certainly, I would hope I'm ambitious. And then on another day, when the clouds part, I love my fellow man and my heart is full. So I'm also all over the place, of high and low. But I tell you, my interests pervade so much of everything I think and say and do. So why is it that it's more ardently to be wished for than seriously to be expected that my choices are guided by true interests? Because I'm fallible. There's a decent chance I don't understand what my true interests are. And on the other hand, you can see now here is this human being saying to you, I know what's good for you. I know your true interests. And I would hope everyone like myself who believes in the rule of the people would say, no way you know my interests better than I do. This very understanding of human being is rooted in the fact that I know my interests, and I deliberate and choose. And that's that. Publius is asking us to reconsider.
It really is an eternal problem in republics. This government is going to rest sovereignty in the American people. And at the same time, states people are not always trustworthy. Right? Publius very closely connects the idea of our true interests with the public good. And then goes on to talk about how one of the great obstacles to the adoption of the new Constitution will be men who confuse their private good, the emoluments of their state offices, the aggrandizement of their position should the Union break up into a series of confederacies, with what is good. And then he counsels us not to think about other people's motives at all. I guess I'm looking for a clue here to what extent you and I, as citizens called upon to deliberate, really do know our own true interests. Enlightened statesmen won't always be at the helm. They won't always have a Publius persuading us.
Yeah, but maybe what we can have is a government elevated above us for our own good, institutions that are created that, while it might not be the enlightened statesman guiding us through our lives at every moment, something that's not possible. I mean, let's go read Plato's Statesman while we're at it and consider that. But at the same time, that's not possible. So the best we can do here is institutions, and try and make those institutions something that outlive the moment when human beings were lifted up by their patriotism, their philanthropy, and the fact that it was a seemingly blessed moment of numerous intelligent human beings running around and participating in government. If I may for 1 second, let's take a step back. And when we look at the two sentences you read in paragraph 2 of Federalist 1, and then look at the end of the paragraph, picking up where Mr. Slutkin ended, the plan offered to our deliberations affects too many particular interests, innovates upon too many local institutions, not to involve in its discussion a variety of objects extraneous to its merits, and of views, passions, and prejudices little favorable to the discovery of truth. So there's the answer. What's going to get in the way? It's something you already said, Aaron. What's going to get in the way of us deliberating and choosing according to our true interest? We have other interests that dominate our view, our deliberations, and therefore our choices. But I want to put this back with that or, in paragraph 1. When we think about whether or not we can establish good government from reflection and choice, or whether we're forever destined to depend upon, for our political constitutions, accident and force. Now by paragraph 2, we see, just to underline my argument, you have to blend both. You can't just have pure reflection and choice. Thank goodness you don't have to have pure accident and force either. So it's a silver lining. You have to realize that politics requires mixing together reflection and choice and accident and force, and also realizing that people have mixed motives themselves. So there's now all of a sudden all of this mixing going on, as opposed to these hard breaks, these or statements. You can't have these pure motives. You can't have pure reflection and choice. Thank goodness you don't have to have pure accident and force either. So politics can't be philosophy. It can't be a seminar room, as much as I love seminar rooms, and you do too. We have to see that Publius's middle ground is here. You can't do away with interest, no matter if it's private interest or public interest. You always have interests. That's the material with which statesmen must deal, politicians must deal, you and I must deal as human beings who live with other people. You always have to deal with interest. And now, can you take that interest and turn it, refine it, lift its view in any way? That's the stuff that's going to happen, I think, through the remainder of the Federalist Papers and the education it seeks to offer. And that education is in no small part an education in being a sort of citizen for this government, but most overtly an education in why it is that this government's good and choice-worthy. And now we can move into the third paragraph. After all of this interest, perverted ambition, aggrandizement, which you spoke of, Aaron. And then the fourth paragraph deals with it. Now here's the way that you really deal with these problems. Furnish a lesson of moderation. Moderation now leaps off the page as the virtue we must nurture in ourselves and our citizenry if we're going to make this work.
Moderation being a kind of caution. Publius says, "So numerous indeed and so powerful are the causes which serve to give a false bias to the judgment, that we upon many occasions see wise and good men on the wrong as well as on the right side of questions of the first magnitude to society. This circumstance, if duly attended to, would furnish a lesson of moderation to those who are ever so thoroughly persuaded of their being in the right in any controversy. And a further reason for the caution in this respect might be drawn from the reflection, we are not always sure that those who advocate the truth are influenced by purer principles than their antagonists. Ambition, avarice, personal animosity, party opposition, and many other motives not more laudable than these are apt to operate as well upon those who support as those who oppose the right side of a question." We come back to this problem, telling maybe majorities of men that you may not be correct, which it's a difficulty in a government based on sovereignty of the people. It also furnishes lesson that majorities maybe shouldn't always get what they want, either because they may be in the wrong or because of something that we'll discuss, minority rights.
It's great that Publius even does this in the opening bit that you read to us. You see, wise and good men make mistakes. So those held to be wise and good make mistakes. And if you reflect upon that for a moment, you should be moderate. That should moderate all of you and your firmness in the right, to play with some Lincoln lines there. It should moderate you. Extremes in politics. Professor Paul Carisse will remind us, extremes in politics are dangerous things. Look at how moderation betters our ability to be human as deliberating and choosing beings. And also it's going to allow us to perhaps push away all of the brush that's obscuring our true interest. So the call to deliberate is also a call to moderate, to soften all the sharp edges on our firm party adherence as the party, let's say, of landowners versus the party of tenants, or the resellers versus the manufacturers. Don't think about this in terms of just Democrat versus Republican Party. Think about it in the way that we can form parties of various interests throughout our lives. And the final bit here, after where you ended, were there not even these inducements to moderation, nothing could be more ill-judged than that intolerant spirit which has at all times characterized political parties. Intolerance. Tolerance is a huge liberal virtue. And anytime you see tolerance from the mouths of these types, you should think religious tolerance. Intolerance is the stuff of religious wars. Intolerance is the stuff of great violence. Look at the sentence after it. You should become moderate because you understand that intolerance is a vice and it's dangerous. So that's why you should be moderate. Final sentence of paragraph 4 of Federalist 1. For in politics as in religion, it is equally absurd to aim at making proselytes by fire and sword. Heresies in either can rarely be cured by persecution. Last two sentences, excuse me. You don't want religious zealotry in your free politics. You need moderation. You don't need fire and sword. You need moderation. So accident and force are back in terms of fire and sword. And then the other side of it, it seems to me, is moderation in service of deliberating and choosing. Heresies in either politics or religion can rarely be cured by persecution. So you're saying there's a chance, to quote the meme. So heresies can rarely be cured by persecutions. So you're saying there's a chance. It may work, but that's not tolerable. This is where you and I are going to be intolerant. I will not tolerate persecution because I want free government. I want liberty, and persecution is the antithesis of liberty. It's the antithesis of choosing as a free human being. Look at how empowering this accidental situation is, the inefficacy of the existing Articles of Confederation. Are you a wise and good man? Are you a patriot? Are you a philanthropist, a lover of your fellow human beings? Are you a considerate and good man? Look at all of this language Publius has used. Are you moderate and tolerant? Or are you intolerant and a religious zealot who, by way of your political party, aims to persecute those who don't give you what you want?
Yeah, it's amazing. And in the first paragraph, it's true, but then here again, how highly Publius raises the stakes of this debate. We start from the narrow experience of the Articles of Confederation in the part of our empire, which for you could be Texas, for me, Baltimore, my home. And then we get to a question of world historic of universal importance. And a question of that kind of doesn't necessarily immediately sanction less of moderation, right? We are the deciding moment where this is a time for choosing. Play not with Lincoln, but with Reagan. Why is it not true that this is a moment for extremism?
May I respond? Well, you see the contradiction in what I just said, that you should be moderate, you should be tolerant, but don't tolerate the intolerant. Don't be moderate in your zealousy, or your jealousy, I should say, when it comes to your liberty. And Publius is going to announce this sort of language in the coming paragraph. So he's telling you to be moderate when it comes to what you perceive to be your interest, namely the existing government. But then when it comes to these principles and the coming government, you should be as if you are full of religious spirit. So he has his cake and eats it too.
Yeah.
You can't do away with these components of human beings and these tendencies of human beings, but what you can do is try and channel them or direct them. I think that's what Publius is doing. An enlightened zeal, he says in paragraph 5, for the energy and efficiency of government will be stigmatized as the offspring of a temper fond of power and hostile to the principles of liberty. An over-scrupulous jealousy of danger to the rights of people, which is more commonly the fault of the head than of the heart, will be represented as mere pretense and artifice, the stale bait for popularity at the expense of public good. It will be forgotten, on the one hand, that jealousy is the usual concomitant of violent love, and that the noble enthusiasm of liberty is too apt to be infected with the spirit of narrow and illiberal distrust. I could continue reading, but I'm going to stop.
Well, it's notable here that earlier in paragraphs 3 and 4, Publius is talking about what's going to motivate the anti-federalists, by which he means not ordinary Americans who are going to vote one way or the other on which delegates to send to state conventions that will vote to ratify the constitutions, but about the men who are opposite him. We can name them. Brutus is one, the federal farmer is another. Notable men, public men, some of whom walked out of the Constitutional Convention, who preempted Publius by taking up the pen and publishing against the Constitution in the newspapers. The first anti-federalist article appeared 10 days after the Confederation Congress recommended the Constitution to the states for ratification or not. That's what paragraphs 2, 3, and 4 are aimed at. This paragraph 5, is talking about the ways in which these, and here Publius will use the term demagogues, are aiming their attacks on the Constitution. Things that touch at the heart of public debate for ordinary Americans. An over-scrupulous jealousy of danger to the rights of the people, a fear of despotic power, a love of liberty.
There's nothing new under the sun. I mean, this is everything you just said. Now, the language may be a little foreign to our ears, but all political candidates say these things today in our major elections. So look at here, moderate Mr. Publius, presumably calling us to think about things and choose, is here attacking the motives of the anti-federalists. They're ambitious, They're bad. Don't listen to those people. Don't be so easily led around by the nose by those who claim to argue on behalf of your liberty.
Dangerous ambition, he says, more often lurks behind the specious mask of zeal for the rights of the people than under the forbidding appearance of zeal for the firmness and efficiency of government. Right? You want your rights protected. Don't go to the guy who's dinging the rights bell. Right?
Yeah.
Actually, firmness and efficiency, what I have the right stuff, he's saying.
Yeah. So let's do the equation. You want your liberty and your rights secured? You need vigorous government, energetic government. Not somebody who's going to say, hey, I got you. I am going to protect your rights and liberty. No. You need government of laws, and that government must be energetic. It must have the ability to meet its ends, its goals, its purposes. It has to have the power to move to secure you. Again, a criticism of the existing Articles of Confederation, which does not have power, which is not in any way self-propelling or self-animating that I would care to admit, that I would see there. And now look at this new thing that's going to have vigor. And at the same time, the enemies of this new thing that's going to have vigor are claiming that they are your friend and that this proposed constitution is bad, and they're the only way to protect your liberties and your rights. And Publius says, don't trust them. They have bad motives. They're operating from maybe what you would say, Mr. Slutkin, narrow self-interest, their own ambition and desire for emolument and aggrandizement, for getting paid and for towering over other human beings. Look at the first sentence of paragraph 6. In the course of the preceding observations, it has been my aim, fellow citizens, to put you upon your guard against all attempts from whatever quarter to influence your decision in a matter of the utmost moment to your welfare by any impressions other than those which may result from the evidence of truth. He now is talking to fellow citizens, and then if you just watch him say, you, my countrymen, you. So now all of a sudden he's saying, I'm here for you. This is a love of you, my fellow citizen, that's leading me to make the arguments I'm making. He is appealing to the shared bond that he has with his fellow citizens. Liberty, rights, but also dignity in their equality as fellow citizens. Finally, happiness. That's the true concern here. And as I spiral the rhetoric up, Publius is here as a philanthropist and a patriot to try and help secure the conditions of our happiness.
And as this Publius suggests that the anti-federalists are demagogues, let's just read that sentence. History will teach us that the former, which he means a specious mask of zeal for the rights of the people, former has been found a much more certain road to the introduction of despotism than is a firmness for the efficiency of government. And that of those men who have overturned the liberties of republics, the greatest number have begun their career by paying an obsequious court to the people, commencing demagogues and ending tyrants.
Yeah, of course. And history's replete with examples of this. I mean, I'm just going to point out just the beginning of Shakespeare's Caesar, and just think about Caesar and how much he's trying to play court to the people and get the people on his side. And of course, it doesn't happen until Mark Antony's speech after Caesar is assassinated. But nonetheless, you see it right there. Demagogues move through the people. We don't have to look at the latter books of the Republic to see this. We just look to history. So it's I'm so sorry, Aaron. It's remarkable because you would think the only way to secure my rights is through somebody telling me they're going to secure my rights, not through vigorous government, because you would think, oh, vigorous government's always the problem. Powerful government, that's what oppresses me. It's human beings who oppress you. Publius is here to teach us. It's you who oppress other people, and it's other people who oppress you. Aaron, I feel like I stole your thunder, and that's where you were going to take us. I'm sorry.
No, I think I want to rather emphasize that. The lesson is not only that you should distrust people who come and say, I'm the only protector of your rights, but also that you, the deliberating citizen, and here I think he really puts a bow on the discussion of moderation, should distrust yourself. Publius is not going to pay court to the people.
This is the lesson in moderation. You should distrust yourself. Ooh, that stings a little hard. You better say that a little more carefully to me if you want me to get on board with this. But you're right. I mean, you're just distilling it. You should distrust these other people who are telling you, everything's going to be perfect. Just give me the power. Stick with this government in this way. And then, as you said, Aaron, you should distrust yourself. The way that Publius has tried to open us to this and educate us in this way, I think is really on the page in paragraph 4. Look, even wise and good men make mistakes. And intolerance that characterizes political and religious spirit is dangerous stuff. You don't like any of that. So, to quote Mr. Slutkin, distrust yourself. Publius is a little softer because he can't scare away the audience. I mean, that's what's remarkable. How do you convince, as you've said now repeatedly, a person who is sovereign to limit his or her own sovereignty? Well, look at the nature of human beings. And what do you want? I can give you everything you want if you give up a little bit. Publius will eventually show us.
And what a way of taking the issue of security of liberty and rights away from the anti-federalists. So trying to think of the rhetoric of this paper, how Publius structures his argument and the language that he uses. It's not simply by saying, as you've noted, that a unenergetic, that a weak government, that a decentralized government is going to protect your rights. Well, not only will moderation protect your rights, not only will an energetic government protect your rights, but here, and this is where the rest of the Federalist takes off, it's going to be the structure of the government.
That's right.
Complicated thing, and Publius is going to explain it to us how it works, as the Constitution does not provide such an explanation in and of itself. This complicated thing has a bicameral legislature. It has this new thing called an executive, by the way, not mentioned in the outline of the plan.
Good point. Yeah, so I agree with you completely. Publius has decided. He's not deliberating. He's already decided this Constitution is good and should be adopted, but he's trying to help other people deliberate and see if they can agree with him. And so he's going to lay out the reasons, as you just said, Aaron, for adopting the Constitution. And he is going to turn to arguments and try and show the merits of the Constitution, something it can't quite show itself. He has to help us understand this complex thing, as you said. And he is going to make these arguments open to all. That is to say, we have to use our reason. We have to try our best to look dispassionately at the arguments he will evince. Publius's good intentions aren't enough. We, the audience, in order to deliberate about the merits of the argument, have to have some sense of his character. This is rhetoric 101. I have to have some sense that Publius is trustworthy, that he's a person who has good character. Just think of a lawyer in a courtroom. If the lawyer appears to be a slime ball, that lawyer's going to have a tough time with the jury. The lawyer has to appear to the jury as the jury thinks it appears to itself. Good, upstanding judges of certain character. So Publius has to now show us his own character through the arguments he's going to make. The reason I'm pointing this out is because I do think there is an education. This isn't a mere recipe regarding the Constitution, but this is something he has to do as statesman who, as such, is an educator and offering us civic education here. So he's not going to talk himself up. He's not going to appeal to his motives as if they're pure as a fresh water spring or whatever. Instead, he's going to leave it up to us as the readers to look at his reasons and the way also that he makes his arguments. So character is now what I want to emphasize. Character is, of course, what a human being does, but it's also the arguments or the reasoning someone offers for why they do what they do, why it is that they act in that way. It's an inexact science. It's rhetoric. It's human character. It's morality. It's politics. So his arguments won't be simply the truth, as we saw him suggest in the beginning of the one, that you should just be looking at true. true interest and the truth is what should guide you. His arguments won't simply be the truth, but he's not going to, as Professor Kessler I heard say once, he will not disgrace the cause of truth.
Yeah.
But it can't be pure truth because he's dealing with me and my anger and my love and my interests. So he has to sculpt the truth to fit the ends.
And if you want to feel particularly bad about yourself, Mike, he has to do this in spite of the fact that adopting this Constitution is truly good, is truly the true course.
He thinks so.
There's no doubt in Publius's mind, right? We can find all the fun 18th century language that exhibits this. You know, our true interests, he says in paragraph 2. He talks about prejudice is literal favorable to the discovery of truth. But just because it's true doesn't mean you and I can handle it, right? That's the idea in that in these closing paragraphs, that he is going to have to put a little English on it.
Well, look at the English he puts, or look at how rough paragraph 9 is. The enemy is here. The 9th paragraph is the enemy has a secret argument and a secret motive to break up the Union. Note, it's only whispered in private circles. It is not publicly avowed. This devastating attack, look, plenty of people are going to say one thing in public, but in private, they are against the Union, and that means they're against you and your true interest and the launching pad of all endeavors you will take up in this country, namely safety, security, in your liberty. The anti-federalists are the one with the evil plan, not us. Now, all of a sudden, look who's here to secure us in our rights and liberty by way of vigorous government. So those opposites that we had in the previous paragraph, what was that, paragraph 5? Now we see them come together in paragraph 9. Yeah, I'm here to secure you in your liberty and your rights via vigorous government. Those people who are for what I'm now going to call weak government in order to secure your rights and liberty are actually just looking to dominate you. And let me use the religious language because there is religious language throughout this paper one, just as if they were the church that our forefathers fled from. You know, liberty doesn't just merely mean political liberty. Of course, it means religious liberty. So I think you can see very incredible rhetorical acumen on display in this paper. And then become hip not only to what's at stake, but how it is you and I have to start thinking about the Constitution in this way where we're being shaped by Publius. Just coming into it with the shirt and shoes that I brought to this dance is not sufficient. I have to hear the music that Publius is playing and move to his rhythm.
We don't have the sense in our politics that elites understand our interests better than we do. When Donald Trump or Kamala Harris or whoever it is come to us, they claim to be not statesmen who are going to lead us in the right direction. But I think this is true of representatives of what we want, representatives of who we are. Publius is going to help us deliberate. This is a different kind of, to use a broad term, leadership.
Why isn't this bare knuckles, hard-nosed politics and constitution making at this point in this paper? You have an understanding of leadership. We're so confused about statesmanship today that we speak of servant leadership. Is this not hard-nosed, bare-knuckle politics and constitution making? That might lead you to speak to the people in a certain way. But we're being invited into the workshop, and you and I are capable upon reflection of seeing how hard-nosed all of this is.
Yeah.
How at times seemingly manipulative it is. Manipulation's not a dirty word. It's there's good and bad manipulation, of course, I think. Personally, I think. So, okay, last thing I'm going to say. Now we have this challenge before us. You and I can try and understand the mechanics of the Constitution, 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, and infinity of characterizing different terms of office. We can look at the mechanics of the institutions and try and understand them and understand why they are the way they are. But then finally also, we need to understand why we are the way we are if we are shaped by the institutions. Churchill said, of course, we shape our buildings and then our buildings shape us. From Publius, I want to say, we shape our government and then our government shapes us. And that government, our Constitution, is shaping us throughout the tremendous rhetorical, educative efforts of Publius.
So we don't understand the motives of others, although occasionally Publius will claim to. We are often in error, although Publius will not admit that often he is in error.
Right.
And we often have an erroneous understanding of our interests. Public for certain, perhaps private. And all of that should lead us to be moderate. I think that's what we got out of Fed 1.
This is great. Thanks for your time, and thanks for taking the time to discuss Fed 1 with me.
On to the next one, I guess.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
This has been the Good Government Podcast with Aaron Slutkin and Michael Hoffpower.